Hello, my name is Alicia Jackson Hall. I am a middle and high school special education teacher in an alternative setting in Southeast Georgia, and I am also a student completing the final semester at Georgia Southern's Tier 1 Education Leadership Certification Program. Today, as a part of my class requirement, I am going to share my comprehensive analysis of a third grade mathematics unit using pre and post test data. For this analysis, I applied Bernhardt's data driven continuous improvement framework to help us better understand where students are, where the focus needs to be, and what the next steps should be to better support all learners. So I analyzed 53 students between two homeroom teachers. Before the unit test, the class average was 57%. And then after instruction, that average dropped to 53%, which is a decline of negative 3.8%. And it is a concern. Of course, whenever there is a decline in anything, there should be a concern. So, breaking it down even further, only 23% of the students showed measurable growth. That means over 3/4 of the class either stayed the same or declined, which should also be a concern. When nearly half of the students show no change, it signals that the current instructional approach may not be adequately meeting their needs. I also identified significant gaps between student subgroups, particularly the English language learners. And this analysis is not about blame. It is about understanding where the gaps are so adjustments in teaching and instruction can be made. So let's first look at class-wide performance. A pretest was given and the average was 57%. The post-test was given, the average was 53.2%. A net change, again, of a negative 3.8% decline. According to Bernhardt, analyzing how students grow, not just where they end up, tells us about the effectiveness of our instruction as teachers. Now let's take a look at growth distribution. 23%, which is 12 students, show positive growth. These are students who came in with gaps and improved. 45%, which is 24 students, showed no change, which means they had the same pretest and post-test scores. Now, this is the largest group, which is problematic. 32%, which is 17%, actually declined. That 45% no change group is the biggest red flag of all the groups. When nearly half of the class shows zero growth, it suggests instruction may not be differentiated enough. Assessment items may not be measuring what was taught, or students may not have had opportunities or the necessary number of opportunities to apply new learning. Now let's break down the performance by homeroom teachers. I compared the performance of homeroom teachers' classes. Teacher AT, which had 21 students, started at 43.8% and ended at 45.7% with a growth increase of 1.9%. Now, while a growth of 1.9% may seem small, I want you to notice this. Teacher AT students improved. They came in lower, but they moved in the right direction. I remember some years back, again, I'm a special education teacher, and my students don't always perform well on assessments. And I was frustrated, and I was talking to my principal, and I said, they keep missing it. They keep missing it. And he said, Ms. Jackson Hall, let's look at what your students have done the 3 times this assessment has been given. They started here, they increased, did not get a passing score, but there was increase. Then they started here and they moved to here. Not a passing score, but each time your students have taken this assessment, there is growth. There is progress in the right direction. So that's my personal take on growth, even when the numbers are low. It tells us that something is working in Teacher AT's classroom that we should study. Now let's look at Teacher JS, who had 32 students. These students started at 65.6%, which is good, but they ended at 58.1% with a decline of negative 7.5%. Okay, this is concerning. Teacher JS started with a stronger group, but saw a significant decline. The question isn't, why isn't Teacher JS struggling? Or excuse me, why is Teacher JS struggling? That's not the question, but rather, what conditions or instructional approaches in Teacher AT's learning environment led to the growth that Teacher JS could take and benefit from? This is where teacher collaboration becomes essential. These two teachers need to share what worked, what did not work, strategies, differentiation, and then troubleshoot together. Okay, now we're going to look at performance by student subgroups, which is my area. Again, a special education teacher. We're always dissecting what the students in my population, what they did or did not do on the assessments. And this is probably the most critical slide. In some school districts, these groups are identified, or I have heard them be identified as the 5%ers, the 10%ers, or the 20%ers. They are the smaller groups that some feel really don't have that great of an impact on the scores. But on the other hand, some districts feel that the focus should be on these smaller groups. And I do have a district where teachers do want to focus on that smaller group because they feel that as their scores increase, the gap gradually closes. Bernhardt emphasizes that disaggregating achievement data by demographic reveals equity issues. General education students, 39, declined a 4.1%, post-test 59%. Your ELD students, there were only 5, declined minus 4.0%, post-test 40%. The SPED students, there were only 7, the decline was minus 2.9%, post-test 43%. Your ELD and SPED students, which was only 2 of them, had no change at all, post-test 10%. And the most striking finding, there's a 19% point gap between our general education students and our ELD students. So let me put that in practical terms. A general ed student who got 60% right, while an ELD student got 40% right. Now that's not a small difference. It's a significant achievement gap that tells us our current approach to supporting your English language learners may not be sufficient. Now, according to Bernhardt, these gaps don't exist in isolation. They are reflections of the school system. So here, the question to ask is enough adequate language support being provided? Are teachers checking for understanding before moving forward? Are vocabulary and concepts being explicitly taught? Now let's look at the strengths and the concerns. Teacher AT's positive growth. Students in AT's class moved forward. This means the conditions for learning existed. High performers remained stable. We didn't break our strongest students. There were remarkable gains. 5 students had remarkable growth. These outliers show transformation, shows that transformation is possible. There was full engagement. Every student participated in the assessment. Now, with those strengths, here are the concerns. Overall class decline. The post-test average is lower than the pre-test. This indicates instruction did not adequately address the gaps. We had the plateau effect, 45%, which means when nearly half the class shows zero movement, the indicator here is insufficient differentiation. Then our subgroup gaps. The 19-point gap between Gen Ed and ELD students is an equity concern. Teacher JS's decline signals something changed between the pre-test and the post-test. Although they started high, that decline is a concern. Bernhardt's framework, the continuous improvement framework, analyzes data across 4 dimensions. Demographics. Who is our population? The data here reveals stark differences between the ELD and the SPED students. The 19-point gap between the ELD and the Gen Ed students tells us that being an English learner is significantly associated with lower math achievement. Let's look at achievement. How are students performing? The overall decline suggests that our current teaching practices are not effectively moving students forward. Now, what is the perception? How do stakeholders perceive learning? Different student outcomes suggest different experiences. Some students make remarkable gains, while 45% made no gains. What are the systems? What practices produce outcomes? Different teacher results indicate that how we teach matters enormously. Let me say that again. Different teacher results indicate that how we teach matters enormously. Teachers need to pay attention to this. What are you doing? Are you lecturing for an hour? Are you just handing out worksheets without direct instruction? Are you reteaching? These things matter. The systems, practices, and structures at AT's classroom produced different results than in JS's classroom. Now we will take a look at how data drives decisions, and I'll share the 5 recommendations that I have. The first is immediate, and it is item analysis. Pull the test. Look at each question. Which caused the most trouble? Which showed improvement? The second is examine instructional practices. I recommend that there is a comparison between teacher AT's practices with teacher JS's practices. What's happening in AT's room that leads to growth? Number 3, differentiate support for the ELD students. Implement vocabulary pre-teaching, that is very important. Sentence frames, visual supports, language supportive grouping, or implement language supportive grouping, and have frequent checks for understanding. The 4th recommendation I have is to follow Bernhardt's continuous improvement cycle. Analyze, plan interventions, implement, assess weekly, and adjust. The last is monitor higher performers, provide enrichment, increase the DOK, and include real-world applications as well as peer teaching or accelerated concepts. And I have a 60-day action plan. I'm not going to go through each one of them and explain, but weeks 1 through 2, item level analysis. The team needs to meet, needs to analyze every test question, create a spreadsheet that identifies patterns and content standards needing reteaching. Weeks 3 through 4, teacher collaboration PLCs need to take place. Share practices from teacher AT's success. Ask the questions, what worked in AT's room? Can we observe a lesson? Can we come in and see what you did? What small changes might help JS's students? Weeks 5 through 8, targeted interventions need to be the focus here. For the ELD students, vocabulary pre-teaching, sentence frames, additional practice. For the plateau students, reteach the skills, provide support, and for our high performers, enrichment. Then weeks 9 through 12, formative assessment and monitoring. Every week, give a quick quiz on retaught skills. Track the progress, adjust based on results. And finally, in week 12, reflect and reset, and then celebrate the improvements. It's always good to celebrate. You always got to pat them on the back for the things that they did well. Analyze which interventions work best. Reset the goals for the very next unit. So now, I'll wrap up this discussion with Bernhardt's central thesis. Data is a tool for improvement, not judgment. What we have here is a clear picture of where students are. Some are thriving, some are struggling, but many are stuck in the middle without movement. There are teachers with different results, and that's okay because it's actually an opportunity to learn from each other. The achievement gaps we see, particularly the 19-point gap for ELD students, are not fixed. They're current realities created by our current systems. But we have the power to change them, and we can change them through closer examination of what's working, intentional differentiation, collaborative problem solving, regular progress monitoring, and a willingness to adjust. The data shows where everyone is. The practices we choose will determine where to go. Teachers, let's commit to using data analysis to strengthen instruction for student success. Thank you.